Welcome, everyone, to episode 19 of the MTP podcast. I am your host, Michael Marcangelo, as always, joined alongside the real BK Bob Kelly and Broadway Joe Malkin. And today we have an extraordinary guest. He is the former head of officiating for the XFL. He previously served as the NFL's vice president of officiating from 2013 to 2017. He's currently an analyst, a rules analyst for the NFL and NCAA on Fox. And most importantly, he's a stand-up comedian. We have Mr. Dean Blandino. Dean, thank you so much for joining the show. And how you doing?
I'm good. Former stand-up comedian. I don't do stand-up anymore, but sometimes when I talk about officiating, maybe. But yeah, I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing very well.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. We have a lot of questions that we want to kind of ask you and topics to go over. And I think, you have been, whether you know it or not, I don't mean to get weird, you have been a very integral force of our lives for the last probably 27 years since you were an intern in the NFL, and then you took up the instant replay. So I guess I want to ask, first and foremost, what got you interested in joining the NFL as an intern?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any officiating experience. It wasn't something that I was interested in. I played football, loved the sport, loved all sports, baseball, hockey, basketball. And I grew up in New York. I went to school in New York, and like all the major professional sports have an office in New York City. And had a communications degree, had a background in TV production, wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that. And I just took a shot in the dark and sent my resume to the NFL and Major League Baseball and NHL. And the NFL called. They had a couple of internships available, and I went in and interviewed for a few of them. And one was in officiating. And they called me and offered me the position. And I was like, yeah, definitely. And it kind of just went from there. I started learning officiating, being an intern, and my career kind of progressed from that point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, because typically you don't land a career with one of the most popular sports out there, and you've been involved in football obviously since 1993. Obviously, I'm a huge wrestling fan. I think you've been at a couple of wrestling shows as well. You've been part of the XFL. What would you say some of the differences are between what you've done in the NFL and what you were building in the XFL?
Yeah, I mean, the XFL was such an amazing experience. Now, I still get upset when I talk about it because of what happened. It was doing so well. And obviously, how do you prepare for a pandemic?
Right.
But what was so cool about the XFL was the ability to start fresh and just create something and look at the rules from a different perspective. Have the ability to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit and be able to shoot what's happening in the replay booth and hear what the officials are saying and all those things. So the XFL, I mean, I started it from the NFL, and that's always going to be, a big part of my career. And I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for the NFL. But the XFL was such a cool experience. And I'm hopeful that they're going to come back in the spring of 22 and, with Danny Garcia and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson involved. And I'm just hopeful that I could be a part of it again because it was such a cool experience.
Yeah. Honestly, like when I heard that The Rock and Danny bought that, my first thought was, I hope that they keep what was happening this past season, the same, because, the first version of the XFL was so gimmicky. It was WWF football, right? Now it felt like they were kind of getting things right. And they were taking aspects of football that we like from the NFL and bringing it on and presenting it in a whole different way. I know everyone else on the show did. I loved the fact that you could hear the coaches' conversations with the quarterback. Like that's something that I wish that they would do in the NFL. Is there anything that you think that the NFL will take away from XFL 2.0 this time?
Yeah, well, they definitely have discussed different things because of how well received some of that XFL stuff was. So, I know they talked about the XFL kickoff, and that was, what made that such a good rule is that, you're trying to promote kick returns, but keep it a safe play. And that's what the XFL kickoff did. And the NFL, we've seen it. They've tweaked the kickoff so many times in so many different ways. So I think that for sure will be discussed in the future, and definitely the kind of the transparency, and then the ability to hear and see what's happening behind the scenes. I don't know if the NFL will go that far. You're talking about an established league. Every club is very, they're very protective of their own stuff, and so there are rules in place to prevent some of that. But I think the NFL will definitely look at things like the kickoff, more of that transparency, because people loved it, and it was fun. Even being a part of it, it was fun to watch that reaction. Because when have fans ever been like excited about something officiated related? Never.
Yeah.
We were getting like good feedback about officiating, other than you guys, because you guys are all about officiating. But
Dean, I've always been a big fan of officials and officiating, and one of the things I kind of preached to these guys was humanizing officiating, which I think really has been something that the NFL, and definitely with the XFL and some of these other leagues, and the way someone like you interacts with people on social media is really humanizing the game, the profession of officiating in the NFL. But one thing that really interests me is how far the NFL has come since the re-implication of replay in 1999. And it went away from the game in 1991, and they had it for about 6 years, and it really changed the way the game happened. And you were one of those pioneers that really was put in charge of re-implementing replay in 99.
Almost the pioneer.
Yeah. And,
right.
and so many things have changed in the last 22, 23 years. Do you think that the league is going in the correct direction in terms of officiating when you look at how much it has changed?
It is. That's a really good question. And it's just, we've seen the evolution of replay. And like you mentioned, the old system, 1986 to 1991, I wasn't at the NFL at that time, but that system was, if you can remember, 2 VCRs. So it was basically you had 2 VCRs recording, and if you wanted to look at something, you had to press stop,
record,
let the other one record. So imagine trying to review calls with 2 VCRs, how long it would take. There were unlimited stoppages. So that system went away. And I, when I got to the NFL and the technology started to change, the internet, digital video, right? We can watch video wherever. We're on a Zoom call right now, right? In 1995, we didn't know what Zoom was, but the technology continued to improve, where we said, okay, it's all digital. It's more seamless. We're basically just recording the program feed. What everybody watches at home, we're recording it. And we're just marking points on it. And with a touch screen, I can access any one of those points on the video immediately. So that made a lot of sense, because now it wasn't going to take, 4 or 5 minutes to review a play. But to your question, where are we going? Right? The technology continues to improve. And the calls we were looking at in 1999, remember, that was standard definition. Now we have high def. We've got all super slow-mo. So we're seeing more things than we could ever see back then. And what does that mean? It means we're reviewing more calls. We're overturning more calls. So where do you draw the line and keep that balance between the on-field officials officiating the game and then letting technology help, but not be, too intrusive? And I think that's going to be a challenge for the NFL, for college football, for any professional sports league, is maintaining that balance, because the technology is great and we want to get the calls right. But do you want to watch a football game where every time we're waiting for somebody upstairs to give a thumbs up or thumbs down? Like, who wants to watch that? So I think it's going to be a challenge for the NFL to maintain that balance.
The way it has progressed, and just to follow up, sorry, Bobby, for stepping in there, but the way it has progressed, we've seen we've seen the ability to replay PIs. We've seen then we saw that retracted, and we've seen that a lot over the years, where you're able to review something, then not able to review something. And I think one of the best things that was implemented was making a call and then going back and look at it instead of not making a call. So we're out at the 1 yard line, a pylon goes down, we'll call it a touchdown and we'll see what it was. Yeah. And I feel like that makes the process faster. Is that what you were aiming for?
Yeah, we were looking at initially when we put the system in, they wanted to keep it limited. That's why the coaches challenge system went in. Whereas before it was just replay official could stop the game like college, right? So they wanted to keep it limited, coaches challenge for everything outside 2 minutes, but inside 2 minutes to prevent a team from not having a timeout, not being able to fix a big play or to manipulate the clock. You had the replay official. Then we started to look at, okay, scoring plays. The clock is stopped. There's no reason where the team could create an advantage that way. Let's make that an automatic review. Big plays, scoring plays, turnovers. Let's take that off the coach's plate. They can keep their challenges, hopefully, for the other stuff, and let replay just review it. Like you said, ruling on the field is a touchdown. It's at the pylon. Replay can look at it quickly. Yeah, it's a score. Confirm it. Let's move on. If it's not, then they'll stop the game and look at it. So that was part of the discussion to make sure we get those big plays right, scoring plays and turnovers, and give the coaches a little more, flexibility with their challenges.
So with the implementation of how advanced technology has gotten with, slow-mo, everything like that, what's the determination of where, you may think you see something, but you had to slow that tape down to, 1/8 the time, 1/30th the time. Where's that determination of like, okay, listen, we've been looking at this play for 15 minutes and we still don't know what's right, what's wrong. Where's that determination being made? Is that in the booth or is that the refs on the field?
Yeah, that's in the booth. And that's really the basic concept of replay. When we put it back in, we said, okay, we're going to start with the call on the field is correct. Mm-hmm. That's where we're going to start. We're not starting, we don't know. We're starting, it's correct. And we have to see indisputable visual evidence, clear and obvious evidence that it's incorrect. And to your point, if we're looking at this for 10 minutes and we're going super slow-mo and we're looking at 4 or 5 different angles and trying to piece them together, is that indisputable, right? Is that clear and obvious? Probably not. We want the reversals, the overturns to jump out where you go, there it is, clear as day, ball hit the ground. Boom. Everybody can see that. And if you remember Mike Holmgren, who coached the Packers and coached the Seahawks, he, in our meetings back in the late 90s, he said it was a 50 guy in a bar standard. Like if you can get 50 guys in a bar to agree on something, then that's obvious, right? So that was kind of what we went with. And I think that's the challenge with the better technology. Are we going to become more technical and become less clear and obvious standard and more, with this overly technical review process? And I think that's one of the, I know it's one of the concerns that I have going forward.
Yeah, and kind of following up on that, I know that with the competition committee in the NFL and all the coaches, right, they want to get the rules right and have everything by the book. So I guess my question, based like on your experience, would they rather have the officials make the call on the field and stand by it, or would they rather have it go to the technological aspect and look at the replay and understand exactly what happened?
Well, I think they'd rather have the on-field ruling, maintain the integrity of that. The officials rule the catch. And we got to see 100% that it's not a catch in order to overturn. That's always been the philosophy. And I think that allows you to achieve greater consistency. Whereas if you just say, hey, you don't know what the ruling is, and you're going to look at it, well, maybe this guy says it's a catch, this guy says it's incomplete, and then we get into less consistency. So I think that's where the competition committee has been and will continue to be. But again, as technology gets better, I think what wasn't clear and obvious 10 years ago has become clear and obvious. And I think that's part of the deal.
I have to give you a disclaimer, Dean. You have a resident Cowboy fan on the screen with you, and I'm telling you this because you said the word catch.
Well, I was going to say that you guys are all Boston, right? I'm looking at Patriots, I'm looking at Celtics.
That is a story that
it's the way it should be. Yeah, that's a 2-hour podcast altogether.
That's probably better fit for a therapist's couch. But what I will say is you said the word catch 3 times in that last answer, so I'm going to have to defer.
Does that give you a little?
I'm going to have to defer to Bobby, the resident Cowboy fan, so that he can ask his question.
So that leads me to my question is, if there is something where it does become a question where maybe everyone in that replay booth is questioning, oh, that was a catch. I don't know what play I could be talking about. Maybe, Dez caught it.
No one knows.
But so, like, is that something where when you are, so let's say it does go to the booth, the entire booth is split on a decision. Is that something that you guys revisit that rule at a later date? Or is it something where it's like, okay, that's the rule on the book. That's what it is at this point. Because, in my opinion, Dez caught it. But as soon as I saw the play actually happen, I was like, okay, I know that's getting overturned. I know he didn't catch that by the NFL book. I know he didn't catch it. But
yeah, no, I know what you're saying. And look, and if we're split in the booth or, the referee and whoever's making those decisions, if you're split, then that typically means you don't have enough to overturn it. Right. And we always look, right. The catch rule has been, debated and an issue for a long, long time because there is a subjective element. And just a little background on the Dez play. I mean, I'm in the NFL Command Center. Gene Steratore, who works for CBS now, he's the referee. The play happens. First of all, I'm going, all right, it's 4th and 2. Just give it to DeMarco Murray. Let him get a first down. Right. Instead, I see the ball in the air. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a big play.
Yeah.
I see Dez go down. I see the ball pop, and I go, all right. And I'm watching the Green Bay sideline, and I'm almost like praying that McCarthy doesn't challenge because I know it's going to be controversial either way.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the red flag came out, I literally said to the room, I was like, just be ready because the SHIT is about to hit the fan. And Gene and I talked about it. We went through it, and there was no doubt in our mind. If there was any doubt in my mind that by the rule, it was not, it was still a catch, we wouldn't have changed it. And, we went through the steps in the rule, the ball hit the ground, it came loose, the football move didn't matter at that time, and it was an incomplete pass. But that rule, because there were plays that looked like catches, but by the rule they weren't, the competition committee continued to look at it and tweak. Because what we want, is we want everybody to understand the rule. We don't want people to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. And you always try to, there has to be some level of common sense, attached to it. So there's always that part of it in those conversations. And we'll still talk about catch, no catch plays, forever.
So we as you mentioned, you see the Red Sox, Boston, the Patriot stuff, the stuff behind Bobby there. I think along the same lines, we've had so many plays like that through our fandom, through our lives, and your time with the NFL. And I know Mike's going to bring it up, so I'm just going to bring it up now. We've had the Fail Mary, we've had the Dez catch, and back when you were a replay official back in the NFL, you weren't at this game, you weren't doing this game, but the Snow Bowl between the Patriots and the Raiders. This is one of the most controversial calls in the last 20 years that literally, in our minds, sparked a dynasty. What by rule, I kind of defer to Bobby again on this. By rule, the Tom Brady tuck rule was not a fumble by rule in the NFL. What in your mind would you have said that was now and back then?
Well, yeah, back then it was pretty straightforward. It was a pass based on the rule at the time. Once you started the hand coming forward, it was literally a pass until you actually brought it all the way back into your body. And we know that's what Tom was trying to do, but he didn't get it all the way back into his body. Woodson hits it, ball comes out. And like you said, and I agree, right? If that's ruled a fumble and stays a fumble, who knows if the Patriots go on to be the dynasty that they were. And I say were. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
no, it's okay. We've done the same thing.
Were.
Trust me.
Dean is definitely were. Definitely were.
I've said that in the past, and they've always proved me wrong. But now it feels different, though.
Yeah,
but
feels right.
It
Doesn't
was
feel wrong.
It was a pass at that time. Under the current rule, which was changed, it would be a fumble. And we, and to think about the greatness of Tom Brady. I mean, that was 2001, 2001. And we just had a pass fumble play last night. Yep. I mean, it's insane. He's still playing at such a high level.
Yeah. And just a follow-up to that, because that involved Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and as Boston fans and, kind of a New England flavor on this show, how many, and we don't need an exact, obviously, but how many times over the last 22 years, have you seen rules altered or changed because of, I'll give you three names: Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning?
Yeah, well, it's quite a few times. And the thing about the Patriots, right? And I'm sure you guys know it, and it's real. I mean, the Patriots were they were winning and they were dominating and they were doing things that you hadn't seen. And the other teams around the league, it's all the gates, right? You had Spygate, and then you had Deflategate, and you had all these other things. And so you think about the rules that were changed. What is, again, the greatness that is Bill Belichick as a football coach is he understands the rules to a degree that most coaches don't. And I used to have great conversations with him, weekly conversations during the season, not just about the Patriots games, but about other games and rules and things. And what Bill, it wasn't, you're not cheating, but you're going to try to gain an advantage based on the rule. And you're going to try to do things to give your team a leg up. And that's what he did. And, we saw the deal with the timing with against the Jets, where they took the delay of game and then the false start. And then, then the Titans did it. And so there's been a bunch of those that have been involved with the Patriots and also with Peyton Manning. And again, that just goes to Coach Belichick. He's just, when it comes to the entire picture, the football aspect, the coaching, the general manager, the personnel, and the officiating and rules, he knew it all. And that's what made, makes him so great and made the team so great.
Made him dangerous too for you guys.
Yeah, I think
no question. And I joked with him. I asked him, hey, you should get on the competition committee. He's like, no, I don't want to, because a lot of people on the committee just complain about the Patriots.
And he knows no one would get away with anything ever again if he joined that competition committee. He'd be like, all right, nope, we can't.
Because Harbaugh tried to do it in Baltimore a few years ago, which is still one of my most frustrating experiences, even though Bill was living in John's head rent-free for a little while. But the whole eligible, ineligible receiver, that was just it was frustrating to watch as a fan too, because you don't know what the heck's going on.
And if Vrabel tried to do it right back to him again. Yeah.
I think, for us, like the Belichick that we see as fans, right, is a very like rigid, he grunts, he snorts. Obviously, like he's different with you. And I was reading an article, I think from back in like 2005, when he actually spoke with your colleague, Mike Pereira, in the back. And he said, I'm realizing one thing: you never win, do you? Like you have 16 losers every week. As a coach, as fans, as players, either you win or you lose. You feel the euphoria or the catastrophic defeat. For referees and for people in your position, what was it like knowing that no matter what, this is going to be a wrestling term, you were walking out of that game as a heel?
Yeah, no question. And Bill, said that to Mike Pereira, that and like you said, you're going to teams, they know, and you talk to people at teams and the facility, the building feels different after a win than it does after a loss. Well, in officiating, it's always the same. And you're always just putting out fires, and there are no wins and losses. And it just always feels like a loss, because a win for officiating for would be an entire week of NFL football without one question about the officiating, right? And that never happens, right? That's just impossible. So you're trying to minimize the damage. And when you talk to a coach, I talk to coaches on Sunday night, Monday morning. They're not calling you to tell you how amazing the crew was and how great a call the side judge made in the third quarter. And those are the ones that stand out in my, time as head of the department. There were a handful of times where a coach called just to say how well the crew did, and those kind of stand out. But that's the thing in officiating, but that going in, you're not, if you want a profession where you're going to get a lot of pats on the back, then don't go into officiating. It's not going to happen.
I know that you mentioned at the beginning of the show that, you did hang up the microphone. You're no longer a stand-up comedian, but we're just tying into this question.
Sure.
What's worse? Like what feels worse, being booed by 70,000 people for overturning a touchdown, or telling a joke and nobody laughing?
It's not even close. Telling a joke and having it just completely bomb is a million times worse. It's more personal. It's more, and I did stand up for like 10 years. And there were times where you would just, whether it's an audience or whether the joke just, I didn't deliver it and it was just crickets. And it's the loneliest feeling in the world. And whereas, I get people, you could go on my Twitter feed and there's people that are just, they hate me, like legit, never met me, never talked to me, but legit hate me and tweet really just awful things. And that's like, all right, whatever. Like, I don't care. But I can remember every time a joke didn't go over and I'm like, that was a funny joke. That audience.
Dean, I have the same problem with my wife. Honestly, I do. They never land. No. And you were doing stand-up comedy in New York City, so it's not like you were doing it, in some small town. These people were really expecting a lot, so you had a tough crowd to begin with. But you do in the NFL as well, and kind of going off of that a little bit. And sorry, I just lost my spot there, but I want to change gears because this is a question that jumped out at me. And Mike, I'm sorry if I jump on you here, but
why stop now, dude?
Yeah, I know. I've been doing it. I've been doing it for 12 years. I might as well continue to do it. This has really stuck out in my mind. As Mike mentioned, your colleague, you and Mike Pereira do Last Call every week. And one thing that stuck out to me today was protecting your players and protecting players at every level. And we all know that this is very important. What have you guys really tried to implement in the college and the NFL game to make that uniform across the board to protect players?
Yeah, it's always, when we talk about making rules changes, discussing rules, there's a couple of things you look at. And the first one is always player safety. That's number one. Then you look at like competitive fairness, and then you look at consistency and officiating. Can the officials consistently officiate this rule? So when it comes to player safety, and I started at the NFL in 1994, and the rules were much different. You didn't have all of the protections for defenseless players that we have today. It was really just helmet to helmet and nothing else. Now, forcible contact to the head neck area to a defenseless player. Now you have the targeting rule in college where you have the disqualification. So I think, both college and the NFL have done a really good job formulating these rules, expanding them, because what we know now about head injuries and concussions and their effects, without those protections and without those rules, we won't have a game. We won't have professional football. We won't even have college football if we don't protect our players and continue to keep the game, and even have that trickle down to the lower leagues and peewee football and all that, because that's where you get that's kind of your lifeblood. And if parents don't want kids to play tackle football, that will eventually trickle up and impact the game 20, 25 years from now. So it was always a big thing for us. It continues to be. And it's the number one priority, is that player safety.
So that kind of goes into another question I have when it comes to instant replay, kind of partnered into that. Is that something that the NFL has looked at? I know when Andy Dalton got hit a couple weeks ago, they did an instant replay to see if someone would get ejected, what the case may be. Is that something where the NFL is almost looking to go down an NBA path, where they start reviewing these personal fouls on a case-by-case basis every time they happen to protect that safety? Or,
it's a good question, because, and that's something when, we had talked for years with the competition committee about things like, the pass interference rule that they implemented last year and didn't work out. But it was, when are we going to look at some of these player safety fouls and make those reviewable, like the targeting in college? And there were a lot of clubs that had proposed rules changes. So I think that's going to happen at some point in the NFL. I think, again, the challenge is keeping it limited, because if you're going to review every foul, and there are a lot of player safety fouls, that could be a problem. But I think if you limit it to maybe defenseless player protection, because again, the game is so fast and it happens so quickly, and the on-field official, you want to protect the player. So it's close. Maybe the contact was to the head neck area. The official throws the flag, and then you get the super slow-mo replay that shows, well, it was actually in the chest. That's 15 yards and a big deal to that team. So I think it is going to happen at some point. Some of these player safety fouls will be reviewable. But again, it's just making sure that it's not too intrusive and we don't have too many stoppages during the game.
Right.
And along that same line, I was reading an article about something, a project that you were doing that would pretty much create a uniformed officiating approach from pee-wees to high school to college. How far off do you think we are from that happening? Because I do see that there's definitely a difference between obviously pee-wee and then elementary school and high school football.
Yeah.
And then there's that same leap between the NCAA and the NFL. So how far away from that uniformed approach?
Well, I think one of the things we're looking for is trying to find, a connector between even just high school football, college football, and the NFL. And we did have a meeting 2 years ago with representatives from all groups just to talk about player safety rules. And I don't think because the athletes are different that you can have the same set of rules for high school, college, and NFL, right? The NFL athlete is elite, and high school, right? I'm sure we all played high school football.
I played high school football.
Right? So it's a different deal. And so I think you have to take that into consideration. Even college, right? Division III is much different than Ohio State and Clemson. But I think if you can look at just whether it's just defenseless play protection or if it's low blocks, if you can try to create just some continuity across the board, I think that helps players develop. It helps coaches that we're coaching the same technique, and as the player jumps from one level to the next, they don't have to learn a lot. One of the changes, just to give you an example, was the chop block rule. Right, the high school and colleges had eliminated the chop block rule for a long time on running plays. It was still legal in the NFL, and what we saw was defensive players who had never had to protect themselves from a chop block because it was illegal now get to the NFL, and now they're getting high load, and we're seeing injuries because they don't know how to play it. And that was one of the changes we made to say, you know what, we got to get rid of all high-low blocks, whether it's a run, pass, or kick, because that's going to protect the players, and they're going to have that familiarity with the rule throughout their entire career. And then that's just one example. And I think all those groups need to get together and have that discussion. Just keep that conversation going.
Yeah, great. I completely agree, and I think that right now it would be hard, like you said, to follow the rule, letter by letter because of the differences in athletes. But just the spirit of the rule is something that you can kind of try to enforce. It sounds like that's what you're talking about. A few things that I wanted to kind of go through now about the present day of football, because we've talked a little bit about your past and obviously all of your list of accomplishments. There was something that you said on last week, so I think it's week 10 of Last Call with Mike Pereira, the show that you do. You mentioned, I think he went off on kind of like a little bit of a rant. He said he was going to about bad calls. And you said that you're just thankful to be in a position to critique good or bad calls. So back in July or back in June, how optimistic were you that there was going to be an NFL season? And based on what you've seen so far, like how well have they done?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before. I think the NFL and everyone involved has done an amazing job. To think that we've got through 11 weeks, and there was a point in July and August when cases were spiking, and we didn't know. I was kind of in a good place in April and May and even into June. And then July and August hit, and I said, wait, we might not have a season, or this could be delayed. And I just think the NFL has done amazing. When you think about, right, what the NBA did with the bubble, and the NHL did a bubble, baseball did a bubble for the postseason. That's almost impossible in the NFL. The number of people that you have involved in an NFL organization, when you think about just the players, when you're talking about 53 on an active roster, another 10 to 15 on the practice squad, then you have all the trainers and everybody else, front office people, everybody that's involved. You're talking about hundreds of people per team. And to say that you could put everybody in one city, it's just not going to happen. So they took the approach of just strict testing, strict protocols. We've played, I think, one less game to date to this season compared to last season. Some games have been moved around, and obviously right now, right, cases are spiking again. Who knows what the winter will hold, but you gotta, I just think it's been an amazing job that the NFL has done, and the players, everybody and hopefully we can get through the rest of the season and get the playoffs and the Super Bowl in without any, major interference.
Yeah.
One big question that I have on that subject, and we've talked about it a lot, off the air and on our podcast, is that COVID list that they have. How familiar are you with that? And can you kind of give just a quick overview if you do have an idea? Because it's you don't have to test positive to be on it, but if you get contact, so it's kind of a gray area.
Yeah, it is. And that's where, you don't know if someone's on that COVID list, did they test positive, or were they just in that close proximity to somebody that tested positive? What we do know, if you're on that list, somebody tested positive, right? And that's the contact tracing. So they've got, right, everybody's wearing a band. It identifies when you're closer than 6 feet, and it tracks it. So right now, and it feels like, right, you could go on Pro Football Talk or ESPN or whatever, and you're going to see, Ravens COVID list, Jaguars COVID list. Every day we're seeing players added to it. It's a combination. I think one of those things, right, once you go on that list, then you have to get tested. You have to have a series of negative tests. Some, if they're asymptomatic, it's a number of days, where if they're asymptomatic, they can go play. I don't know all the ins and outs. It seems like with testing and COVID, who knows what to believe, but
Sure.
I just know that the NFL, they're very strict on the testing. And when you're on that list, it could be, like you said, it could be that a positive test, or it could be just because of the tracing, we do it at Fox Sports. I mean, I get tested twice a week. We've had positive tests where people, they didn't test positive, but because you were in close proximity, you couldn't go into the studio. So I think everybody's dealing with it to some degree.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, my entire fantasy football league team tested positive for COVID today. So none of them are going to play this week.
His team name is the Quarantine too. Yes. And it has been since the beginning of the season. So he did it to himself. So
that's brutal. That is brutal.
And you just mentioned, that you get tested twice a week. Can you talk a little bit about how your day-to-day life has been affected and changed, and how you do your job has changed, during a pandemic?
Yeah. I count myself very lucky, and I'm blessed, that, I still get to do what I do for a living. And I know there are a lot of other people that are impacted much more than I've been. But for me, really, one of the things that, and I guess it's a silver lining, is, I work with the NCAA and help, coordinate the replay program and work with replay officials. And we normally have these in-person meetings. Well, obviously all that got canceled, but right, what have we all learned throughout this ordeal is that we can connect with people via Zoom or whatever else it is. So, I'm on Zoom calls every day with replay officials from around the country. I'm able to work from home during the week. We're doing last call virtually on Zoom. And the only difference for me is getting tested. And then when I'm in the studio, obviously, wearing a mask, not as many people in the studio, maintaining that social distance. So you adhere to the protocols. But for me, and other than just staying home and staying in, it hasn't changed drastically, which I'm very thankful for.
That's awesome. I wanted to kind of touch back on something that you mentioned. We talked about your experience with the XFL. You were also part of the was it the Allegiance of American Football as well, the league from last year? So it sounds to me like you believe there is room for another professional football league.
Yeah. Oh, no question. No question. When I first started at the NFL, we had NFL Europe, and they were playing overseas, and it was such a great training ground for players, coaches, officials, just everybody. And I really feel like that development opportunity, and it's not, you've seen other leagues, right, that try to say, oh, we're USFL or whatever it is, we're going to compete with the NFL. No one's going to compete with the NFLs, right? You play in the fall, that's not going to happen. But the spring, and I think the XFL 2.0 proved it, right? That it was that you can have quality football, quality production, quality people, and people, look, the ratings it wasn't like we were getting 10 million people a game, but you were doing just as well as a regular season baseball game or regular season hockey game or basketball game. And people were showing up. And you look at the development. PJ Walker
PJ
just
Walker.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
won a game for the Panthers, and he was, probably the MVP of the first 5 weeks for the XFL. If you look at just from an officiating perspective, the NFL hired in their initial go around before some officials opted out. I think they hired 6 new officials. 5 of those officiated in the XFL. So obviously, just there's room. There's definitely room. The AAF was a great experience too. Ultimately, the financing, the financial backing wasn't there. And but I think with the right backing and the right people, and I think the XFL proved that. And what I'm hopeful for, and I think, having had some preliminary conversations with the XFL people, they're not looking to reinvent the wheel. They know it worked, and we don't need to make a lot of changes for 3.0.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on the quality of the product? Because as a pro wrestling fan, I did watch the XFL, the first one, right? And it wasn't great. Like we had Tommy Maddox and we had He Hate Me. Those are the 2 standouts.
Sure.
But when you talk about the games from this past season, the drop off, obviously it's there, but the quality of football was good.
I thought it was really good. I thought it was a step up from the AAF, the previous year.
Yep.
I thought if you wanted to kind of compare to something, it was just as good. It was better than college football across the board. It was just as good as your top college football, even better. Because again, these are professionals. These are most of the players had been on NFL rosters at some point, practice squad, whatever it may be. So the quality was great. What was also great was the production. Both Fox Sports, ESPN, they put a lot into it. When you watch a game, and it's not like, I don't know who these announcers are. There were, Kevin Burkhardt and Steve Levy and these people, Greg McElroy, that you see on their normal broadcast.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. So the quality was great. And again, and you're seeing that with players getting signed by the NFL and obviously PJ Walker being a highlight. And I think there's room for it. And I think there's players out there that, look, are we going to have another story like Kurt Warner? No, probably not. I think, you're not going to have somebody that just pops out of the Arena League and becomes a Hall of Famer, but you're going to have good quality players that can stay on NFL rosters come from the XFL.
Yeah, and I think a big thing is like they actually have that opportunity to do that now. Is like you look at a lot of leagues out there. We have the G League and the NBA. We have AAA in baseball, and that's how I saw the XFL for the NFL. Is like they could really fit right into that niche. And I'll tell you what, I may not have watched many games live, but I was scrolling through YouTube every single time I saw an XFL highlight video pop up. I was watching that 100% of the time. Because it was good football, and there was great production involved, 100%.
Yeah, and no question. And people are going to get that when someone gets that opportunity. Who knows if PJ would be on the Panthers if it weren't for the XFL.
Right.
I always go back to a guy I went to school with at Hofstra in New York, Wayne Corbett. I mean, Wayne, and he said it, without a preseason this year, a lot of guys didn't get an opportunity. Wayne made the Jets. He was like the 9th receiver at the start of training camp. Made the Jets in preseason and had an unbelievable career. Without an opportunity, that never happens. And the XFL can provide that for people.
One more Hofstra great real quick. Miles Austin. Just throwing that out there.
And Wayne Corbett was
football factory. I'm telling you,
the Hofstra pride. There's the Hofstra pride drop today. And Wayne Corbett really could have benefited from the player safety rules that are in place now, because we know his career could have lasted even longer. He was one of those guys on those Jets teams that were likable because he was that 9th guy. We've had a few guys like that in New England, the Troy Browns, the Danny Woodheads of the world. So you mentioned from the XFL where Steve Levy basically parlayed that into a Monday Night Football gig. You mentioned the officials that were hired into the NFL. Something that you did while you were a big part of while you were the VP of officiating with the NFL was hire the first full-time female official, Sarah Thomas. And This has been such a big deal. And you mentioned the backlash that you get on Twitter. She's gotten backlash on Twitter. And I think one of the biggest things that I see with her is going through her profile. And I saw that she officiated a game with a broken wrist in 2016, which blows my mind because I probably would be home on my couch with a bag of ice and some Percocets, but I look at an official like her, and I don't want to say a woman like her. I want to say an official like her, because she has really staked her claim as a very good line judge and now a down judge in the NFL. What was that process like, bringing her into the NFL?
Yeah, and that was one of the things, when I came in and we talk about diversity and inclusion, right? Last night's game was the first NFL game with an all black official, officiating crew, which is an amazing accomplishment. But, when I came in, it was, we didn't have any female officials, but so we kind of start to look at the pipeline and say where we know there are women out there officiating, right? And we've got to give them an opportunity, because imagine what officials go through, right? They, like we talked about earlier, there's no wins, right? It's always a loss. So it's already a pretty crappy job. And then imagine being the only woman, and there's no locker room, and there's no, right, there's the uniform fits differently. All these things you wouldn't even think of, as a man. And Sarah had her goal all along. And we talked about it. She didn't want to be known as the first female NFL official. She just wanted to be an NFL official, like the other 120 officials that we had. And she had worked her way up, got started the same way all the guys did, and got to the point where, for me, I didn't want to bring her in before she was ready, because if she came in before she was ready and it showed, then what are people going to say? Well,
sure,
women can't officiate, females can't do it, blah, 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 all the dumb stuff that people say. So it was important to me that, when she's ready, right, then we're going to bring her in. And in 2015, she was ready, and we brought her in. And my hope is that, and I know, and I've worked with, we had female officials in the XFL, and I've worked with a lot of them. And my hope is that we can have, another one and 4 or 5, however. So it's not a thing anymore, right? When you have an officiating crew with all minorities, it's not a thing. That's just how it is, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the goal. And hopefully that, that takes place sooner rather than later.
So to that end, and Mike's going to do it right now. What a project that you've worked on as the senior executive producer is Her Turf, which we've all now watched the trailer to, and is supposed to be released this year. And everything you just said is something that all 3 of those women said in that promo for that documentary. Is, I don't want to be known as a female official. I don't want to be known as the best female official. I just want to be known as an official. Yeah. And that project, talk a little bit about that project, because we're all really anticipating the release of that.
Yeah, it's, that was something that I didn't even know it existed or was happening. And someone that I'd known for a long time, Anise Kennedy, she was actually the first female official in the NCAA, and she was a scout in the NFL. And Anise had reached out to me and said, well, I want to introduce you to this person, Chantel Hansen. She's a filmmaker, and she's working on a project that I think you'd be interested in. So she connected me and Chantel, and we talked, and she told me, yeah, I met these female officials, and I started following them, and just, went to a clinic and a couple of their personal lives. And, I'd love for you to get involved. And we just kind of hit it off. She showed me like some of the clips that she had already. This was, wasn't a finished product yet. And I just kind of felt, drawn to it. And she's an amazing person, amazing filmmaker. And we finished the project, and it went, it's gone through the film festival. I'd never been a part of any kind of executive producing. I didn't even know what that meant. And we just, we entered it in a bunch of film festivals and made it to a bunch of film festivals, won a bunch of awards. And once we get through the film festival, once we kind of put that, aside, then we'll release it. It was just an amazing experience. And it's really just a really cool film just to see these women and what they go through. And Yeah, it's just a pretty cool deal.
So you just mentioned that beforehand, you did not know what executive producing meant, right?
I had no idea.
So what does it mean?
It means that you are responsible. You have the oversight. You can make decisions. You pay for a lot of stuff. That's the other thing as an executive producer. But you do get kind of final say on a lot of things. So it's a pretty good gig.
That aligns exactly with what Craig
knows.
does. I don't
Yeah,
know if you
Craig
saw
knows.
Craig's face during that, but that's literally Craig's job description. Yeah.
And
Craig
I
is
wonder.
the guy, Craig's the guy behind this whole operation. I can tell.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we can't walk and chew gum at the same
That's all-
time without him. I wonder. Just one last.
I only do about like 75% of the actual work. So
Yeah, that's not that much.
Yeah.
Of, you talked about, Sarah being the first female official, right? Based on, what you saw and what you heard, how did the others welcome her into that fraternity of being an official? Because it's tough, right?
Yeah, no question. Look, and there are some people that are just, and this is in any walk of life, that are just happy for someone's success, right? And they're just welcome them in. And then there are others that there's professional jealousy. There's people that will say, and probably still to this day, the only reason she got in the NFL is because she's female, right? And to that, I say, you got to look at your own performance. You got to look at, right? Imagine being an NFL official, right? How hard that is, and the scrutiny. And then now you're the first female official, right? Imagine what pressure she was under in her first year and is still under. And that's the thing, like, for the most part, overwhelming. The officiating community is an amazing community, I've learned, and overwhelmingly positive. But there are, like anything else, there are people that are gonna kind of be resentful of someone else's success and find reasons to try to tear them down, and that's unfortunate. But Sarah's been amazing, and we still talk and text, and she's doing an amazing job. Worked the playoff game, last year, and I think she's going to continue to have a great career.
Yeah, I think it's always awesome to have, to talk to someone like you who's done so much and kind of reminisce about the past. But that move, Sarah, and allowing, or having a female official will be something that we talk about for years to come. That impact that it will have on the game, on officiating, and just on, breaking down gender barriers, which should not exist anymore. Like you said, it shouldn't be a thing. That's just something that we were all, when we were talking about it, we really wanted to emphasize. And it's a really big deal to us.
Yeah, and real quick, we saw this year, and I just wanted to throw this in there, that there was a game this season where we had the first female coach on both sidelines and the first female official in the game. And again, we talk about it that way now because we're five guys sitting here talking about officiating, right? But Mike's absolutely right. Eventually, that's going to be the norm. And nobody's even going to bat an eye at it. But it was great to see that between the football team, the Browns, and Sarah on the sideline as the down judge. I mean, that was just such a great experience and a great moment.
And it's kind of the balance. And I remember having the conversation with Sarah, when we first, we were going to our first officiating clinic, and there were going to be media there, and everybody, when we hired Sarah, everybody, and we're not talking about like, the local newspaper. It was like Good Morning America. And it was like all like big, productions. And we had this conversation, and I said, listen, I know you just want to be another NFL official, and we'll get there. Right now, you're not. Right now, the league, we're going to celebrate this a little bit because you are a role model. And there are a lot of, young girls out there that are going to see you and go, I didn't know I could be a football official, right? And we're going to have this is going to create, a whole wave of young women that are going to be interested in this. And then I said, and don't worry, we'll get to the point where you're just another official, and that's going to happen. And hopefully, we get to a point where, like I said earlier, it's not a thing, right? It's just, this is the way it is.
It's the Jackie Robinson effect.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
I think so. I asked, I kind of teased the fact that you were going to be on the show. So I asked everyone I knew if there's one question that you could hypothetically have me ask Dean Blandino, what would it be? And this is it. So I apologize. It's with all the technology we have, why do we still use a pair of sticks and a chain to determine a first down from 80 feet away?
So it's a great question. And I was at the NFL. I mean, back in like 2005, we had people come in with laser technology and all this different thing. And I think ultimately, right, there's a drama and an excitement to putting the ball down. It's fourth down. They just went for it. It's that close. And what's more exciting, just immediately knowing, all right, it's short, or everybody waiting, the ball's down, the two old guys come out with the chains, they stretch the chains and it's short or not. I think there's an excitement to that. Look, that's not the only reason. I think the technology hasn't gotten to the point where, you're talking about shooting a laser across the field. There's a lot of obstruction. It's not as simple as in soccer, the ball crossing the line, right? Where that's pretty simple. Where in football, well, when is the knee down?
Right.
When do you step out of bounds? It's more layered. So I think the technology will eventually get there. But I kind of like the chains. Now I don't know is it Progressive or somebody's doing the commercial with the two guys. I like those commercials. So just for that reason alone, let's keep it.
It's always the insurance companies that have the best commercials, and
Always.
isn't it? Always. It's what they do with our money. I don't know.
Like I have Progressive because of the like those. I love those commercials.
It's proof that marketing works, ladies and gentlemen.
It definitely works.
Yeah, the Geico Gecko got me.
Podcast, it's marketing work.
It doesn't only get us, but it gets Dean Blandino too.
It does. There you go.
That's the tagline for the entire episode right there. So going off of that, you mentioned the old guys coming out, the old, they're measuring it. And then we get, and now he's retired and his son is now a referee, but you get Ed Hockley flexing to tell us if it's first down or first down, the beach is that way kind of thing. I mentioned it at the beginning, humanizing officiating. And I think you do a great job of that, just going through your Twitter, seeing you respond to questions. And I learned so much just going through it over the past few weeks, just seeing everything. You have such a passion for the rules, but also for the game of football. If you could say, like, to us, not even our listeners, but to us, like, one thing that could really humanize officials and the rules side of the game, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's such a big deal, and we always talked about that. We tend to forget that officials are people, right? We tend to, we sit on our couch or we go to a game, and we just kind of yell at them, and it trickles down. One of the things we always talk to our announcers about is just be mindful of even the language you use. You could disagree with a call, that's fine, but don't be disrespectful, because people hear that, and then when they go watch their kids play, then they treat the officials the same way. And a lot of those officials that are working that level, they're kids, they're 15, 16 years old, and they have a bad experience and they don't want to do it again. So I think it's just remembering that like in any profession, they're just people. They're trying to do their best. Yes, they're highly trained. They're well compensated at the NFL level. They're supposed to get the majority of the calls right. But just remember that, and I've said this before, if you watch a game on TV and you have, 4 or 5 different angles and slow motion and all that, you go, oh my God, how could that official miss it? Go watch the game on the sideline, right? Watch the game full speed on the sideline, and you come away going, I don't know how they get anything right. Like, it's amazing that they're that right that much of the time. And it's such a big deal, just making sure that we remember that they're people too. And they're not just something that to be yelled at and stuff. It's,
there's been so many people in their home sitting on their couch drinking Coors Light, not a sponsor, saying "damn you, Dean Blandino" for years.
So partnering right off of that question, I have to ask, of all the fan bases who sit on their couch and yell at you and tweet at you, who is the most irrational? For when that bad call comes in, who do you hear from the most out of everyone?
That's a good question. So obviously for me, Cowboys fans and I have a special relationship. But they're not even like, we have a special relationship because of the Dez play. So they're going to give me a lot of crap, and that's fine. It's a give and take. We get it, right? But really the one fan base, and it's a college fan base, that they are irrational. They don't, and I'll just come on, and if my opinion doesn't go for their team, it's like I'm a war criminal. And it's Ohio State. Like Ohio State fans are, and I'm like, your team is really good. Like you're the best in the Big Ten. You're one of the best in the country. You're going to play for national championships. They're playing Rutgers. I'm like, you're playing Rutgers. And they're MFing me on Twitter because I disagreed with a call. So, I like to have fun with people on social media. I think I've probably only blocked like 2 people just because they were so annoying, not because they said anything particularly, bad. It was just like, okay, you got to stop like tweeting at me. Like this is nonstop.
They were persistent.
Yeah, they were very persistent, or DMing me like just reminders that they hate me, and I'm like, that's fine, okay? Because
Noted.
Yeah, exactly. The one guy, I was like, I love you too. Goodbye. Like I'm blocking you. Because I do want to answer like legitimate questions, and I can't, like with all the just the nonsense, it's hard to sometimes.
How do you keep it straight between the NFL and the NCAA rule books? Because they're so different. And to that end, I mean, one rule that I've always kind of thought should be a uniform rule is the 1 foot, 2 foot rule on a catch. Which way? Because I'm very curious on your end of this. Which way do you think that should be? 1 foot or 2?
Well, I think, again, I like the way it is now, because when you think about, and sometimes we forget with college football, the college football rules are going to apply to Ohio State, and they're going to apply to Austin Peay, right? They're going to apply to every level of college football. So 1 foot, right? The athlete is not as good. That's going to promote offense. That's going to be a good thing. When you get to the NFL, right? This is supposed to be the best of the best. You should be able to get both feet down. That's what makes it that much better. So I kind of like that, but it is hard. And my foundation is all NFL rules. That's what I learned from 24 years old. So for me, the college rules are much harder to keep straight because I don't have that foundation, and I work really hard just to try to keep up to speed with the college rules. And I still kind of just mess up sometimes because, I always go back. My fallback is always NFL. And then there are, like you said, there are a lot of differences.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Now I'm going to have that as my talk track whenever somebody says, why don't they change that rule? You also mentioned in your last kind of statement that you wanted to save your time for people who are asking serious questions. So in honoring that, my last question to you would be, if you were a wrestler, what would your gimmick be? And would you be a baby face or a heel?
I've thought about this a lot. I grew up with.
I love how that's how you started that, I have to say.
My 10-year-old son is a big wrestling fan. We've obviously been lucky enough to go to a couple of shows. And I actually have a character that I want to pitch, an actual thing. Like, I'm serious about this, and I'm going to run this by you guys.
Yeah.
You're going to be my test. You're going to be my test. Okay, so I'm going to be a heel, but I'm going to play myself, and I'm going to be the WWE is hiring a director of officiating. Okay, so I am in charge of all the referees, but I'm completely crooked, and I do like calls, and we overturn matches for the heels, and I'm behind a room, and I just like we'll go to a show in Dallas, and I'll make fun of Dez. Like I legitimately want to be that person, and I think it has legs.
I mean, I don't know
100%.
but the former owner of the XFL, I think he has a little bit to do with the wrestling product that's out there.
I do know Vince, and I have a line to Vince. So I am going to pitch this at some point.
We're behind you.
Yeah.
As a character.
Yeah. Well,
tweet at us once that goes down, and we will make sure we spread that word so fast that you will be a heel before you know it.
Absolutely.
Well, obviously, Dean, thank you so much for taking the time. Before we let you go, I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can find you and what they can, if they want to learn everything about Dean Blandino, where do they go?
Yeah, you mentioned Mike Pereira and I do a kind of a video podcast, if you will, on Last Call, called Last Call. You can find it on Facebook. Check out the Fox Sports page on Twitter. I've on Twitter at Dean Blandino. I've had a podcast called Good Calls. We're in kind of looking at tweaking that a little bit. So we haven't been recording episodes lately, but hopefully that'll be back. But just check me out on Twitter at Dean Blandino. And I love legitimate questions. If you want to give me a little crap, that's fine too.
Awesome. Well, Dean, again, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been awesome just kind of talking with you and kind of diving through your history and kind of into your head about what's coming in the NFL, what's been happening. So for Broadway Joe Malkin, the real BK Bob Kelly, the best executive producer in the game, Craig D'Alessandro, and our special guest, Dean Blandino, my name is Michael Marcangelo, and we're signing off.